Hello, welcome to my podcast, Heart Centered Conversations with me, Jane McDowell, the podcast where I ask people to delve into their book collections to find the treasure that has inspired them to do great things in their life and the world. And today it's my very great pleasure to introduce my guest, Nushin. Nushin, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hello, Jane, and thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be with you on the podcast. I'm a women's coach, and I help women who feel like they've left it all too late in life to rediscover their youthful self and tap into the adventure of life. And in fact, the book that I want to talk about is the thing that for me started off my journey because I was the same person, really feeling stuck in life.
Oh, fabulous. So, what was the book?
So it's Martha Beck's Finding Your Own North Star. And the subtitle is How to Claim the Life You Were Meant to Live. And I looked when I was going back to the book, it was first published in 2001.
Okay.
It's quite old as sort of self-help or inspirational books are. But I keep going back to it and I keep sending clients to it, and I've posted it to dozens of people, partly because it was the first glimmer I had that sort of there was a different path. I wasn't on this journey that looked grim and bleak and miserable. And in fact, her book was what triggered a whole journey for me and has resulted in me publishing my own book, hoping that I'll inspire people in the same way who are feeling stuck and don't know how to move forward in their lives.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Nushin, because you sent me a copy of your book, which I started reading. And actually, it's so easy to read and it's really quite compelling. So, yeah, please do share with the audience what your book is, because I think it.
Well, it's called Find Your Wings and Fly, Life Lessons from the Cockpit. And it's about my journey because what Martha started me on was the only door opening was becoming a pilot.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see a future to that, but I followed it. And along the way, as I was learning to fly, I realized all these things I had to learn to be a pilot were also the lessons you need in life. Just saying yes to opportunities,
Yeah.
accepting that they're things you have to keep repeating until you know them by rote. But it's mostly that sort of being open to fear, to failure, to change. And
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest thing that I got from Martha's book.
Ah,
It's a fantastic book, and she's a coach herself. She's someone I follow on social media.
mm,
But it's this one. She had a child who had Down syndrome, Adam. And I think that gave her, she was a highly intelligent woman. She had had a very, I think she was Mormon, or she was in a very strict religious upbringing.
okay.
So her path was very predetermined. And I think this child, or maybe it was before then, suddenly made her think, is this what I want to do? And it was the first time I started reading about um, the option of choosing, of not letting life dictate to you, but going inside to find what your inner wisdom is.
Yeah.
And I think it's things that we hear so much of now, but I don't know in 2001 how much, find your flow, follow your bliss, things like that. I hear all over the place, probably because I'm tuned into that sort of thing at the
Yeah,
moment.
there is that thing, isn't there, that, once it's a bit like, going on a journey and noticing a yellow car and then suddenly you see
Yes,
rare,
yes.
whereas
Suddenly you see
before you
loads
thought
of them.
they're really rare. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. The more you're tuned into something, the more you will see it. Yeah.
So she talks about Haley was talking to you about the inner critic, and you read a lot about that. Martha Beck talks about your everybody. So you'll in your head say to yourself, everybody thinks I'm ugly, everybody thinks I'm stupid. And it's she divides people into your social self, which is how you've become conditioned by society, for, the things you've picked up from your parents, from your just your surroundings, and you have taken on board as this is the way to be. And we need social selves for the wheels of society not to, to glide over and go quietly. But we also need to learn to listen to what she calls your essential self. And often, and I find that too with the women I coach, it's when the two are totally misaligned. That's when women suffer often from burnout. And I'm looking at women in the stage, often where their children are now sort of set, but they've been given so much of their energy and their life force to looking after others that they've actually come unstuck with who are they, where do they feature in this. And Martha's book is very much about tuning into your own inner wisdom and also listening to what we term negative emotions. And a lot of people just suppress them. They sort of, oh, I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling sadness, and I don't want to. So you squash it down. And this
Yeah.
thing of your body keeps the score.
Yes. Fantastic book, by
It's
the way, people.
I know. I haven't read that one yet, but that
Recommend
whole
it.
thing of getting it out of your body, letting what we term negative just pass through you and let it go, but that it doesn't have to sort of get a grip in your life. So
Yeah. Easier
that
said than
that
done, I think, as well.
it is, and
It's a
I
bit like
think it's a
peeling that
constant.
onion, and keeping digging and finding out who you are. Because life is a journey, and all of us at some point get veered away from what we really want to do, and like you say, that the influences that are around us can sometimes hold us back, can't they? If we're in a position where we don't feel like we can express ourselves or have our voice heard, that can have really quite a detrimental effect in long term, can't it? So
Yes, and I mean, she has an example there about a client who literally lost her voice, and when Martha was working with her, helping her to because she either had a nervous tick or something, but it was about her body expressing, "You're not letting me speak," and it was this constriction in her throat. And when she finally spoke the thing that I think it was, she wasn't happy in her marriage, her whole body released because this unsayable had been said and unblocked. And but as you say, it's a an ongoing road. And I see that as a coach myself. Every time you study, you think, I thought I'd sorted this. Come back to it, don't you?
popping up, yeah, yeah, absolutely,
So that's one of the best things about Martha's book is about 2/3 of the way in.
yeah,
This half is a book about change, and I've seen a lot of the other stuff sort of in many other aspects, but I've never seen change described so beautifully. And she talks about change as, that's the one certainty we have in life. We will all
absolutely,
have to
yeah,
face change on many fronts. And for most of us, it's scary and we don't like it. But she describes it's got specific aspects to it, and they're aspects that some people are more inclined to. One, like there's a part where things are getting routine, and you might enjoy that, or you might enjoy the part. I know someone who has ideas that bubble out of they just can't stop thinking, but they rubbish with the routine. So
yeah,
it's these cycles of change, and she talks about change always starts with, if I can tell you that describe her
yeah.
change cycle.
Go for it.
Change always starts with a cataclysmic event, and the event can be from outside or it can be internal. So it can be something like a shock. maybe you're married and your husband dies and suddenly you're a widow. Or it can be an opportunity. It can be suddenly you get offered a job in South America or in Australia. And what's that going to do? It might be going up the ladder, but it's got a whole lot of other implications. Or it can be, which I think like in my life, it was a series of just chipping away and something saying to you, there's something different you need to change. And that's harder to sort of justify change when it's not a big bang of, okay, everything has shifted, but it
Yeah.
is about redefining yourself.
Yeah.
And then she has four stages. The first stage she calls death and rebirth. So the fact that you need to grieve what was past, what has been, whether it was your life as a married couple and now you're on your own or whatever it was, and then start dreaming and thinking about the next stage. Start accepting that there's a possibility of another version of you. And then the second stage is more internal, and she calls it dreaming and scheming. And that's when you, in your head, making ideas. So, say for business, that's when you would start thinking about how would I do this? This is what I could do. And then stage 3, she calls the hero saga, which is where those dreams, then you have to put into practice and get them up and execute them. That's when you really take action, and they won't all work. I mean, you work with that all the time. What doesn't work. So, and then the fourth stage is the promised land, where it's all going tickety-boo, it's wonderful, it's just ticking over, and you've just got to make the odd tweak. And yet people can find that terribly boring and terribly, okay, this is now dull. I want, and almost initiate another change. So
Yeah.
our whole lives are on this trajectory of
Yeah. Absolutely.
constant change.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, for me, that I find that really fascinating for people who really are change averse, that we don't all have this inbuilt recognition that everything is changing all the time. Nothing ever stays the same. If things are staying the same, then basically we're dead, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
even on a cellular level, our cells are renewing themselves all the time, and the seasons are changing, the weather's doing different things, the world is spinning. Nothing stays the same ever.
No. But seeing it as a structure of this is how it happens, and you can figure out where you are. Are you in the internal bit where you making magical plans, or are you in the practical stage where you've got to start delivering the goods and maybe they're not working, and so then you've got to go back to the drawing board. But this whole cycle, and I've never seen it described so succinctly as in this book. I had a client who wanted to be a coach and help people with change. She's someone who'd gone through huge illness, which obviously then is massive change in your life. And I told her, you have to get Martha Beck's book about Find Your Own North Star,
Yeah.
because she explains it so beautifully. Martha writes very beautifully. She's a beautiful writer. I really admire that.
So, Nushin, when you picked up the book and started reading it, what was it that struck you most of all, that made you realize that something else was possible and led you onto a path of doing things differently?
I think it was that sense of tuning into, tapping into your inner wisdom, into, you know, what outside world might be saying.
Mm.
And I'd come from a very creative arts background. I'd always worked as an arts journalist. And suddenly that all came crashing in. And it was sort of, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And I think her book really helped me tune into, I have the answers inside of me. I don't have to look outside to find them.
And was it a painful process for you to find those answers?
Yeah. I
I
think
kind
I
of
think
knew that because I read a bit of your book, but
I think it always is, and I think sort of we want we want everything neatly. We want to be, or we think we want to be, in the promised land where it's all neat and tidy, and yet it can be, that can be sort of, oh, yawn, this is boring. I need a bit of variety and excitement. So yeah, for me, it was this learning to fly was one of the hardest journeys I've ever been on. But I can
yeah,
see now all the things that it opened up, the doors and avenues it
yeah,
opened up in my life was amazing.
yeah, because you were so out of your comfort zone getting into a plane for the first time, weren't you? And it, you know, when I read that bit, it sounded like you were never going to get back into that cockpit again. And yet here you are now, qualified pilot, and yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's amazing what possibilities open up when we do take that breath and step out of our comfort zone. Because yeah, our comfort zone just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
And you've got to keep pushing
Possibilities,
it. That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the a difficult thing, that you can't then ever just relax and go, okay, I've pushed my stepped out of my comfort zone, and now this is, because then that becomes your comfort zone. And so you've got to, it's that thing that you said of you're constantly changing, growing,
yeah,
and it's difficult and awkward and hard.
yeah.
So
So you said that you often send a copy of the book to your clients and people that you know. Are you aware of the ripple effects that you sharing that book is having with other people in your world?
well, you never know what exactly it is, because after I'd said to you I'd like to talk about this book, I suddenly thought, was it this one or was it, because these things just grow, don't they? And you
Yeah,
look at other things, and suddenly the yellow card thing of suddenly you're aware, and what. But I know for this book, for me, it was a first. Now I don't know whether any of my clients. I know the one who was talking about being a coach for people going through change. It was an eye opener for her. But for so many people, it's layers, isn't it? Of you learn one thing and you incorporate that, and then there's something else and you incorporate that, and in the end, you can't really see where did one thing begin and what another thing end. So
yeah, yeah. And also, I find that, you read a book and then the next book or the one after that, you read, and there's like a common thread that runs through them, whether or not they are kind of self-development books or if they're novels or autobiographies. It seems to be this thread that runs through them all.
Fred,
It's really quite fascinating.
because
It's
what I'm
really
seeing at the
fun following the
moment,
thread and see where you go as well. Yeah.
but is this thread of find your flow, find your ease, that everything doesn't have to be difficult and hard and effort, that there's a, if you can tap into that north star,
Yeah.
that essential self, that true path, and as you say, you're constantly being pulled off it for whatever. I mean, I had, with my book, there was I was quite close to, okay, I've got enough material. And then my son got long COVID, and it threw me way off. And I thought, how can I write about, how can I inspire others if I'm not sort of taking off into the wide blue yonder? And it was that sense of, well, we all have these things that knock us back, and it's how we then navigate that. There's not sort of one point where you're at nirvana and it's all hunky dory and you don't have to do anything more. It's just a constant development, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, isn't it? Progress and journeys, they're never in a straight line. They're all kind
Yeah,
of like this,
yeah.
aren't they? So,
And
yeah,
then hopefully you see an upward trajectory
yeah,
when you
absolutely.
look back. But at the time, there are a lot of dark holes and dips, and I think that's what Martha puts so beautifully, is how she talking about your inner compasses, and how you learn to tap into those inner compasses. And I think your body, particularly, I'm sure that was the first time I'd ever heard of sort of on a cellular level feeling
Yeah.
this is wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
you hear stories about people who will get into a lift when their instinct is, or their intuition says don't,
Yeah.
but they do because their social self is telling them it would be impolite. And, whether they get out on the next floor is another matter. But that sort of thing that we're so tuned out of what's good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think, I'm just curious, do you think that that's got anything to do with the how we live our lives now in the West? Because it seems to me that we are really disconnected for the most part from the earth and the planet and, you know, how we are as animals, really, how we fit into nature. There's this concept that nature is other than us, and
Mm.
that's not the case. So I wonder if that has an impact on why people feel so lost and disconnected to where they really want to be. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I was thinking of the changes that would have happened over the last, say, I mean, we've seen such huge changes in 3 years
Mm,
since COVID, but before that, in the last 20, so 2001, in the last 22 years, our whole approach to Earth, and I see my children's generation are much more tuned into what impact is this going to have on our whole environment. They it's less and how's this job going to affect me and my life, not just how much money am I going to make or what success am I going to have. I think, and not obviously not everywhere, and whether it'll happen fast enough is another matter, but I see a younger generation coming up with enormous care. I feel they are much more in tune with their inner compasses than I think I used to be as at their sort of age as a young
mm,
adult.
mm.
Didn't really, you did what you were told more. It
Are you
I think
saying your
there's
children are
much
really
more of a
rebellious, Nushin?
no, actually they're wonderful, but I feel I learn from them, from their wisdom. I really do.
I think there's a
Um,
lot to be said for, learning from younger minds as well. Because again, it goes back to how they perceive the world and they've got a fresh view of it and they don't have that jaded view or they're not looking through the lens of how things used to be, which is
no,
the thing that a lot of people do. We kind of do it as a matter of course, I think, compared to, you know, people are always saying things like, oh, it's not how it used to be. I know I'm saying that sometimes. And it's quite refreshing to have someone with a viewpoint that doesn't have that baggage and sees things in a different way. So, yeah.
so I think that there's, I mean, that's a sweeping generalization. I've met a lot of younger people, but where the social self is less, where they're thinking more about the impact on the planet, the impact on their psyche of a job. They'd rather have a job that brings them joy than one that's, obviously you want both, one that gives you money and success and everything, but not I'm going to do this and grind away Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 or 9 to whenever, and then live my life for 2 days.
Yeah.
There isn't, I don't see that sense of sort of that's what society demands of me.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that's certainly true in a lot of cases. And then on the other hand, it still seems to be very much the same. And I think where we sit, demographically can really have massive impact on people's availability of choice. Yeah.
Yes, hugely, hugely. And I mean, we're in a privileged position, and one's got to be very grateful for that. But it's this. I was just thinking, over 22 years, there's the force of sort of, and I see it as feminine energy, a more collaborative society, a more open, a more sharing. I mean, I can see I've got a blog that I write about flying, and I'm much more being very, I think they're about 5% of women are, of pilots are women. And so, but I
That's low,
write
isn't it?
very, um, I write about emotions and feeling scared and things like that. And I've been amazed at how many guys are interested and follow it because it's it's giving a vent to what they feel, but it's not as comfortable for them to say it. Maybe as women, we're more able to connect, to talk about emotions. But I think society, if I think when Martha would have published her book, there's a stronger voice for that collaborative, unified, caring.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely been a big shift in the last 20 years of that. And there's still a long way to go, I
A
reckon.
long way to go. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we all get stuck along the way. But I
Yeah,
wanted to read something at the end of the book, if I may.
absolutely. First, I'll just thank you so much, Nushin, for coming on, because it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you
It's
and
been lovely.
continuing reading your book as well.
Good. Thank you. It's been
Let's
lovely chatting to you. But I wanted to read
finish.
this
Yeah.
the ending, because I can still remember I was reading this at a bookstop, at a bus stop, and these tears just running down my face, suddenly
Oh,
thinking,
wow.
she's talking to me. It was as if,
Yeah.
and she says, your own North Star is not a place, but a state of being. It is the state in which you are fully and only yourself. You may cover 1,000,000 miles on the way, but ultimately you will come to see that all along, your own North Star has been simply you. You are the best destination you could possibly imagine or experience. Welcome home.
That is
Isn't that
lovely.
beautiful?
Yeah. I can understand why you'd be sitting at a bus stop crying. Definitely.
Yeah.
Nushin, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And I will pop all the details of the books that we mention in the description of the episode.